genealogy of Matthew chapter 1. And by the way, Matthew's the only gospel writer who includes the genealogy of Jesus. There's probably some big theological reason for it. I believe it's because Matthew knew he was writing to a Jewish audience, and for Jews, the genealogy was very meaningful and quite important. So he gives it. We've gone through, we're in verse 7, Solomon, the father of Rehoboam, and I talked a little bit about Rehoboam. Rehoboam was kind of a young Turk. He was going to do what he wanted to do. And his only real consultation was with guys like him. Little experience, little wisdom, and little regard for the people they were supposed to lead. I think, and I know I'm running down a bunny trail, but I think one of the things that happened there, in addition to the hubris and the pride and the arrogance of Rehoboam, I think he misunderstood his role. His actual role was to lead Israel. He thought his role was to rule Israel. Does that sound familiar? Because I think there's not been a generation where that distinction it has been missed in one way or another. I remember a long time ago when I was in youth ministry, we had a guy in our church who was a Tulsa County commissioner. He retired from the Air Force as a lieutenant colonel and had a stellar resume. And I don't even remember the full context of why I invited him, but I invited him to come to a senior, an afternoon of a senior week of camp and talk about leadership in his life. Well, before that time, started, that session and started, I asked him, Mel, how long have you been in politics? And he looked at me and said, Steve, I've never been in politics. He said, I'm in public service. If ever I get into politics, I will immediately resign. And a light bulb went off in my head. There's a man who wants to lead, but not rule. If Rehoboam had the least bit of inclination toward that, there's pretty good chance that Israel would not have divided. Pardon me, but due to his bad choice, the nation split. Okay, Rehoboam, the father of Abijah, Abijah, the father of Asa, Asa, the father of Jehoshaphat, which that's a name that I have a friend from years and years ago wrote a song about a pig farmer who named his biggest pig Jehoshaphat. Jehoshaphat, the father of Jehoram, Jehoram, the father of Uzziah. Now, Uzziah, the father of Jotham, Jotham, the father of Ahaz, Ahaz, the father of Hezekiah, Hezekiah, the father of Manasseh, Manasseh, the father of Ammon, the father of Josiah, and Josiah, the father of Jeconiah and his brothers at the time of the exile to Babylon. So what we've got here is a genealogy that runs from Abraham to David, and to David on to the exile to Babylon. 70 years of exile there. And then verse 12, after the exile to Babylon, Jeconiah was the father of Shealtiel. Shealtiel, the father of Zerubbabel. Now Zerubbabel was commissioned by Nebuchadnezzar, brain belch here, sorry, the Babylonian ruler, to go back to Jerusalem and reestablish the country and build the temple. Zerubbabel, the father of Abihud, the father of Eliakim, the father of Azar, the father of Zadok, the father of Achim, the father of Elihud, the father of Eleazar, the father of Mattan, the father of Jacob, and Jacob the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, and Mary was the mother of Jesus, who's called the Messiah. So you've got this rolling genealogy from Abraham all the way through the centuries to Joseph and Mary. So, a couple of quick things here. There were a few women included in the genealogy. Okay, there was Rahab, there was Ruth, both aliens. They were not Israelites by birth and blood. Then there was Bathsheba, and now Mary. This was a departure for a Jewish genealogy. Women were left out. The mothers didn't matter. It was the fathers that did. Oh, okay. Verse 17. Here's kind of I'm not sure of the big significance of this, but there were 14 generations in all from Abraham to David, 14 from David to the exile in Babylon, and 14 from the exile to the Messiah. You can make something of that, but I don't know that it matters much other than to say, well, here's an interesting fact. You can break this down into 3 equal parts. Now in verse 18, Matthew begins telling the Jesus story. This is how the birth of Jesus the Messiah came about. His mother Mary was pledged to be married to Joseph. Pause. The pledge to be married, but the only thing it relates to in our culture is engagement, but it was a much more binding commitment than an engagement would be today. To have made this kind of commitment, this marriage really amounted to, you are my wife, except we will not have sexual intercourse. I will take care of you. I will become, this is from the male's perspective. I will take care of you. I will pay your way. I'll protect you. It was binding. And the only way that this covenant could be broken was through divorce. So Mary was pledged to be married to Joseph. We don't know how old Mary was. I've read several New Testament scholars think she was around 14. Wow. I think of my three girls when they were 14. I can't imagine them already engaged, pledged to be married. But before they came together, she was found to be pregnant through the Holy Spirit. Well, Matthew just kind of zips through. I wish, well, we do know a little more about this story from Luke, where he writes that Mary was visited by an angel, Gabriel, who said, "You are highly favored and blessed by God." And then he says to her, "You will be the mother of the Messiah." And he uses different words than I'm using, but that was the point. And she said, how can that be? I'm a virgin. And then Gabriel says, the Spirit, Holy Spirit, the Spirit of God will come upon you, and you will become pregnant with the Son of God. Weird thing. I mean, because we probably heard this story. How old are you? That's how many years you probably heard it. We just, yeah, okay. No. Oh my, no. It was way more dramatic and huge than we can probably even imagine. Mary said, "I'm the Lord's servant," meaning I submit to God's will. Joseph, we don't know very much about Joseph. He was a carpenter. We don't know, other than the genealogy where we have his father and grandfather and great-grandfather and so forth, we don't really know a lot about him. We have to kind of conjecture, but there's enough to make a decent kind of conjecture about him. I don't know how she was found to be pregnant, but Mary was found to be pregnant. And I don't know how broadly that fact was known. But we know this in verse 19, but because Joseph, her husband, was faithful to the law, okay, a committed God follower, and yet did not want to expose her to public disgrace, he had in mind to divorce her quietly. All right, you get a glimpse into the character of Joseph. First of all, God-fearing, God-following, and a devoted observer of the law. And now, he was not legalistic, and here's why I say that. Because if he had followed the law completely, he would have had Mary stoned to death. Because that's what the law called for. But he didn't. He didn't want to expose her to public disgrace or death. So he made a plan that he would quietly, discreetly divorce her. I see a compassionate man. And you can go with that as far as you feel like you need to, but that's all the time I've got today, so that's all the farther I'm going to go. I'll see you next time on So Care with Stevie Boy.